citizen.
Out of many
we are world citizens. Same vision is for equal rights and justice for the people them. What's happening to this beautiful world that we're living in? World citizen, lift up your voices.
Welcome to another episode of the People-Powered Planet podcast. I'm Arthur Kanagis, the host of the program with co-host Melanie Bennett. And today we're excited to have a guest who is part of from Minnesota, which was kind of a city that played a key role, a state and a city, Minnesota, and the whole St. Paul area and so on. They were a key part of the launching of the movie, The World Is My Country, which is the background to why we have this podcast. The film first had its world premiere at the St. Anthony, Maine in Minnesota, and a key person who helped bring that about and helped organize that was Dick Brainerd, who is here with us listening to our guest today, because he's played a key role in assisting kind of all of the progressive things that have been going on in Minnesota. Now, to set the stage, before we introduce Frank Kroncke and his incredible story, I want to say a little bit about the background to give you a sense of the flavor and tone of what was happening there in Minnesota. And that is, Minnesota was a state that was very active in people wanting to protest the war in Vietnam, and very involved from not only the grassroots, but going right up to the whole state level. In fact, the city of Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota were among the first in the certainly the first in the United States, and among the early ones in the whole world to declare themselves world cities. And this is a movement that Dick Brainerd was very much a part of with Lynn Elling, who was one of the mentors of the World Citizen Movement, and who knew Gary Davis and was a key part of this whole program. Now, in order to just give you a taste of this, of how this grassroots effort went up to the very top in Minnesota, and key people like Hubert Humphrey and Walter Mondale and national figures from Minnesota were a part of this movement for world cities and to end war. We're going to play a little clip from the governor of Minnesota, and you can see the full clip here on our website at theworldismycountry.com/shorts.
As the governor of Minnesota, I'm proud to introduce this story. In many ways, it is an incredible story of a Minnesota grassroots effort to promote permanent peace in the whole world. The people involved differ in many ways as to religion, politics, race, and color. However, the common denominator is that we belong to the same human family. We're dedicated to the proposition that if the human family on spaceship Earth is to survive, the world problems of war, pollution, and starvation must be outlawed. This is our quest. I sincerely believe this story needs to be told throughout our state, throughout the nation, and yes, the world. Who knows, the concept of world citizenship could be the spark that will ignite the flame of permanent peace under just law.
Here is a state where from the grassroots up to the top, people are very concerned about building permanent peace in the world, about being part of the global family. And as he said, people from all different walks of life coming together to help build this movement for peace. And so thank you, Dick, for being a key part of both our testing out the film in Minnesota and for being a part of helping us launch the film at the St. Anthony, Maine. And when you go to our website, if you go to theworldismycountry/applause, you'll see the incredible standing ovation we got, the incredibly enthusiastic reaction from viewers when we did that showing in the theater there that launched our film on this tour, where it's now gone around across the country on over 100 PBS stations and out on Dish Network and Direct TV and so on. So this gets us to set the frame for Minnesota, where something very, very important happened, and where we have a guest who saved, probably thousands of lives in Minnesota through his bold action. And I'm not gonna give away his bold action right now. I'm gonna introduce him and let you hear more about him. But Frank Kroncke played a key role in the Catholic activist movement, and I'll let him tell a little bit more about his own background and his dedication to to the principles of the real principles of what Jesus was all about. You know, love your enemies, love your neighbor as yourself. These powerful principles that actually could be much more powerful than the weapons of war. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Frank and let him give you a little more introduction to his background and what led up to the incredible action you're going to hear about today.
You know, we all of us, like 1970s, like that's 50 some odd years ago, seems like a long time. And as they always say, lots of things have changed and everything has remained the same. People look at the world as if it is legitimately broken up into things like the United States, Argentina, England, Russia type of stuff. And in fact, what we found out since the 60s, especially from science and otherwise, you know, the space travel and stuff, is that the Earth is a unique place for us to live. And it's the only home we have. And every time we go to war, like Pogo, when the cartoon character, if you all remember Pogo, he said, I have bet the enemy it is us. That was something that, you know, I grew up with my father. I'm one of 9 kids. My father was in the Navy when I was born. He refused to work on the bomb. He had been a chemist from the University of Notre Dame, and he was down in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and he wouldn't work on it because he was a Catholic. And he said, I can't do that. I can't work on a weapon of mass destruction. And that's sort of the story, because the weapons of mass destruction are still going on. So in one sense, somewhat with sort of dark humor, I say, you know, everything that I did failed. You know, we, at the same time, you know, we mobilized a lot of people, people got incented. So my personal story is that after being in the monastery and the seminary and going to a Catholic college and stuff, I became a conscientious objector. And I thought that was a good thing. I did 2 years of alternative service at the University of Minnesota Newman Center under Father Harry Berry, who's himself a well-known peace activist in the Midwest and around the world for some people. And basically, you know, men kept coming to me after Mass talking about the war. And I've mentioned this many, many times to people. I mean, I listened and I was just sort of like blown away, you know, all the things that they were struggling with. Well, they didn't want to go to Vietnam, but, you know, if they didn't go, they had to go to prison. And if they went to prison, they could have become an accountant or a doctor or whatever. At the time, it was like, you know, they walked into a wall. It was like, you know, you go or everything in your life is messed up. I thought at the time, being an idealist and a young person in my 20s, that the bishops of the United States Catholic Church would step forward and be a witness to Jesus as a nonviolent hero. But exactly the opposite occurred. We were denounced. I was personally denounced by the Archbishop of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and forbidden to preach at any of the churches in his diocese. So anyway, when we did the Beaver action, many of us, including people on this call, like Chuck Turchik, had done draft raids in other places. And one of the most effective ones that we had done in February of 1970 called the Beaver 55, which was the name of another group back in Pennsylvania that raided FBI offices and stuff. We did it, remember, this is pre-television, pre-internet and stuff. We did it because we wanted to sort of give them the idea that we were connected, which of course we weren't. So I'm telling you all this stuff because, you know, we had no idea what we were getting into, you know, the complexity of the whole military industrial complex and all that stuff. And in Minnesota, we had companies like Honeywell making bombs and all this other stuff. So it was an awakening. So part of the other awakening is that this led not only to the draft raids of the Beaver 55 in February of 1970, but because of what went on. Now, if you go back and think about it, check this out on the internet. After February, you had Kent State, you know, had Cambodia invasion, things like that. People were really sort of didn't know what to do. So we did another draft raid. And the idea wasn't necessarily to get people to do draft raids. It was wherever they were in their life, it was to resist.
What you're talking about here is a really something we want to hear a little more about, a really daring adventure where activists who cared so much about peace and so on were willing to, and really about having a better world and saving lives, were willing to put their lives on the line to go to break into draft boards and destroy the draft records that made it possible to send these boys, these young men at that time, to Vietnam. And so, as I understand it, you actually ended up destroying. Well, we'll get more of that later in the story. But again, I'm glad it's setting part of the stage of this. You mentioned both the activist movement and the weapons manufacturers were there. Honeywell was making these cluster bombs, which were designed as what they called area denial weapons. And what they were is they would, and we've seen many of these used now in the Ukraine war, but one big bomb drops a whole bunch of these little bomblets. And these little bomblets were at that time designed, some of them had these flechettes that would tear into your skin, some of them these little pellets, and they would try to figure out how to make them cause the maximum damage and not necessarily kill someone. In other words, what they said is, in the area denial strategy, if you kill one person, they're out of commission. But if you can, if you can tear up part of their body, then you tie up all the people who are the medical staff and all the people working on them, and you have a more impact on demoralizing the society, which was the idea, to try to demoralize the people of Vietnam from supporting what they called the Viet Cong, which was really the national liberation struggle of Vietnam to free their country from foreign invaders. I mean, all the lies. There wasn't any dominoes that fell. It wasn't China trying to take over. All that turned out to be baloney stories. But what it was the people of Vietnam trying to free their country. And so what they did in these is they found out that the metal pellets could be detected by X-ray. So they changed them to these fiber pellets that couldn't be detected by X-ray. So it was so much harder. It would take hours to operate, to try to dig in there and find out all the little pellets and pull them out. And there's just like the most gruesome things that this military industrial complex was making. And yet they were paying so many of the bills, supporting politicians and so on. And so it's in that context that Frank then ended up doing something quite remarkable. So I'll let you continue telling a little of your story, but give us a sense of what it was like that day. I know you have another one of the members of your right here on the call. Maybe he could unmute and join you. But what was it? Was it frightening? What was the story like? Tell us what led up. Describe one of your first raids, say it in detail. And then tell us what happened the next one after that.
The first raid, the Beaver 55, again, I'm at the Newman Center, so I think I'm doing a good thing. I'm doing my alternative service. So the second wave of people who came to talk to me were returning veterans from Vietnam. And they tell me these stories about warfare. Oh yeah, they went in, they had to kill people, something. And they said, well, here I am. What was that all about? Where's that getting us? Why was they doing that type of stuff? And I'm going like, I never myself have been in battle or whatever. So this one guy, Gordy Nelson, says to me, you've got to stop the story from being told. You have to shut the system down. And then I say in French, the little effer left my office, and I just sort of went berserk and went over to what's called the Twin City Draft Information Center, where I met the likes of such crazy people as Chuck Turchik, who's on this call. Now, part of the humor there is that I'm 6'3" and Chuck is about 5'5". I have no idea, Chuck. You have to correct. So we were the short and tall of the draft raiders. And in the very first Beaver 55, we actually hoisted him up and sent him through a transom to open the door from the inside. So what happens there's something, it's a little long-winded story, but I want to tell you. The guys are down here in this office, which, like I said, ironically, because Minnesota at the time couldn't afford to sustain all of these draft offices in every county in the metropolitan area, it costs too much money. You have to have staff just to do one draft board. So they centralized them. So there's like 45 draft boards in the St. Paul office, and Minneapolis has some similar number. So the deal is that, while guys were downstairs, and women, there was always women involved. I think this is important, especially Quaker women who were involved in the draft. While they were down destroying the 1A files, if you remember the times, if you had a 1A classification, you were going to be drafted. And so we destroyed the 1A files. And so Chuck and I and another fellow went upstairs and it happened to be just a happenstance. And in the same building, the state director of Selective Service had his office. And we broke into his office, and, there's pictures of, at the time, Nixon and the vice president on the wall. And they're Chuck can tell you what some of the stuff they were doing. And I sat down at the director's desk and I pull out the top of it. And there's these blank draft cards and stamps. He's the last resort for people to get drafted. So what did we do? We put them in a bag, and after the draft raid, some of us go up to Canada and we give these out, to the draft center up there to have people come back to the United States who thought they were leaving forever. Now they come back and they have a legitimate, selective service card that says like they're 1F or whatever, 4F or whatever they wanted.
4F means you had a physical or mental impairment that got you out of the draft.
Right. So the thing is so how do I know this is true? A couple of years later, after prison, so it's about 5 years later, I'm living in Oakland, California, doing this job for the American Friends Service Committee, a Quaker group. And I get a knock on the door, and it's the FBI. What do they want me for? I've been in prison by that time, and I was on parole, and I'd gotten married and stuff. And they were looking for a guy who they knew had our draft cards. So that plus a letter that's on my website, www.minnesota8.net, a letter from a fellow who said, you destroyed my draft file, and here I am, retiring, and I have 17 grandchildren and all this stuff. And if it hadn't been for you guys, we wouldn't have been here. So we didn't know at the time how things are going to work out. The communication today is much more immediate, instant messaging, even emails and stuff like that, or conversations on the net like we're having right now. So we came to realize that the government saw us in a certain light. So one of the part of our stories is why we were broken up into 3 trials, which eventually works to my favor. If you know anything about the law, when you have 3 separate trials where everybody's doing the same thing, say like a bank heist or some type of scam, they try to consolidate to save money. But they ran 3 separate trials. And the reason they did that was that because of the Chicago 8, which most of you probably know about, much more famous group that protested at the Democratic Convention, they didn't want to have another sort of Minnesota 8 single trial. So we actually had 3 trials, and Chuck was in a different one than I was in, and I had a different judge. But they all ended up at the same sentence, getting a 5-year sentence, which at the time, we didn't see any end. So so you can tell by my constant chatter here, 2 things: that I taught college and that I'm also an extrovert. So the fact is, when we were on trial, one of the things, is I went and I made so we opened up our trial by saying we did it, and we want to tell you why. It's just like when we got arrested I was in this town called Little Falls, Minnesota. You can find it on the map. It's up in northwestern part of Minnesota. And when the FBI came here, they came in, imagine what it's like. You're sitting there trying to break into these draft files, and guys come in with guns drawn out, and they point them at you. And I never know why I did what I'm going to tell you I did. As I walked up and I said, you have nothing to fear from us. Like, yeah, right. And we have nothing to fear from you. And they handcuffed us and put us there, and we eventually go on trial and get the sentence. But so this is how things happen. If you just live life as you know you have to, so that when you wake up in the morning, you can look yourself in the face and you can feel good, no matter the rest of the world is saying, you're a crummy person, you're a convict, you're a criminal, you broke the law, all this other stuff. Is the fact that, Daniel Ellsberg comes to our trial, and we're the last place that he is before he decides to have his own trial. And he released to us called the Pentagon Papers, which most of you are familiar with. And the Pentagon Papers showed this sort of pattern of deception by the government for people in America. Well, we would have never met him, and he would have never met us. And he had just come from a meeting of, maybe Chuck would remember the group, a big peace movement group, and he had decided that, he was trying to get the papers released so that he had been in Vietnam twice as an officer, but he didn't want to, break the law. So when he did do this finally and did go to trial, he faced like 105 years, but then they had a mistrial and they never tried him again. Okay, why didn't they trial him again, and why is what we did important and is being replicated by many people with all the things that you folks are doing, how important it is is that, we found out that the Vietnam War really wasn't the big problem. The big problem still is nuclear war. They have nuclear stations all throughout, like I said in the joke, sort of, the state of North Dakota is the third most powerful nuclear nation in the world. They have more silos and nukes in the ground. And you say, oh, they've dismantled them. I don't believe that. They got this stuff, just like, Putin is sort of rattling his little thing, saying, I want to invade this country. And if you come and stop me, I'm going to, sort of nuclear. The one smart thing that the president is doing is not starting a nuclear war, because everybody gets affected by that. It doesn't, the fallout doesn't stay in one area. So when we went to trial, of course, we had tremendous support from the anti-war community, a lot of peace activists and stuff. And I think that's important to talk about, because people went out and, did whatever. One of my very close friends, Karen Clark, became a state representative. She just retired. I mean, there's all types of things that come from the war. Go ahead, Arthur.
I just wanted to back up just to make clear to people the big picture of what happened here. So here we have Daniel Ellsberg, who was looking for a way to legally release the Pentagon Papers. And if he could have gotten to testify at that trial, and he could have had to prove what you were doing was in fact upholding the law and the government was violating the law, then he could have legally released those papers into the trial transcript, and it would have been a legal way to release it. As it happened, the judge did not allow Daniel Ellsberg's testimony, correct?
That's right. And what we found out later on was that, the government was following Dan everywhere he went. So the judge in our trial, a guy named Philip Neville, who's now dead, during most of the trial, he's laid back and he's doing stuff. And when Ellsberg's there, he's like leaning forward. Almost every word Dan says, he says, objection, sustained.
And they didn't need a lawyer to say objection. The judge is saying objection.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that the government had contacted Neville and told him who Ellsberg was. So Dan was carrying a briefcase where he had some of the Pentagon Papers. He wanted to get them introduced as evidence. So he had set up a little dialogue with one of the lawyers. So I was attorney pro se, but we had some regular lawyers who knew the legal system and stuff. So Dan had it set up with one of the lawyers, Ken Tilson, who's now also dead, to get this little conversation going where he would say, get the prosecutor to jump up and say, prove that. And Dan would then take the Pentagon Papers and say, here, I can prove it. But of course, that didn't happen. So it was after the trial. We ended the trial not knowing what he was trying to do. I mean, Ellsberg, we didn't know what everybody knows about him now. And so a friend of mine, Brad Beneke, who's one of our group, and I were on a trip back east. We were staying at Dan's apartment in Massachusetts. Dan was living in California, as he does right now. And we would see it on the news, about the Pentagon Papers. Just like, wow, if that had happened at our trial, we would have got 100. We would have got 100 years. Okay, so the real story here is, as much as people want to say, well, you did a great thing or whatever, we didn't really know how we acted out of desperation. It was like, we talked, we preached, we did all types of stuff. We went to colleges, we did everything. And nothing, wrote articles to the newspapers and stuff, and it was like there was no impact. So the fact of the matter is, raiding the draft board did get people's attention. So the feds were like, which is their job, as they came in and they basically arrested us. So just again, to show you how messy the whole thing is, we found out that the feds were at draft boards where nobody ever came at night, and they missed two of them. Two of our group, one of them went in a town and actually destroyed the draft board. Another one went down to do their raid, and by this time, there was a sign up that they had, a security system. So there's a lot of funny stories that happened, but it was a very human thing. And part of it is desperation, and part of it is you got to just sort of put your head down and do the work that we need to do. Like, Joseph Frank is doing here in his type of work, and, all types of people doing good stuff. And it doesn't take, I always try to tell people, I'll tell you my story, but don't think that you have to do it. It's not just people who did Catholic radical draft board raids that are the people to talk about. There were literally thousands of people who are against the war and are still against the war, yet the war goes on. So I'm in a different phase of my life right now where basically I'm not as much trying to change the system as walking a different pathway, which I won't get into right now at the moment. But I mean, that's important, is that I don't think that the warrior culture is going to like evaporate overnight. So
let me go back to one thing. So at one point you mentioned during one of the raids, the FBI apparently showed up with guns drawn, and you said, "Oh, that's all right. You don't have to be afraid of us." Is that correct?
yeah, you have nothing to fear from us.
So that was where you actually got arrested, was in the midst of one of the raids.
Yeah, it was in the midst of the Minnesota 8 raid within the town I was in, and the guy pointed a gun in my face. I trust me, I can still remember it. And I always, you know, when you want to talk about something happening that's out of your control, I sort of like an angel whispering in my ear, you know, tell them that they have nothing to fear. Like, I don't think the FBI was afraid of us, but so they handcuffed us, and they're taking us down, driving from this town, Little Falls, down to St. Paul to put us in jail. And I realized halfway down there that there's a guy in the back seat taking notes of everything I'm saying. So I stopped talking. I figured, well, we'll do that at this time. Okay, so the last little thing before you might want to ask some questions is that, so we raided a draft board. Okay, that's a serious offense. We get charged with sabotage of the national defense. 10-year sentence. Sabotage. We're saboteurs. I mean, you can count the parking tickets I had. I had never broken the law. I'd never been in jail. And so we get to say we're saboteurs. So this is the deal. They indicted us as sabotage, and then when they go to indict us, they change it to interference with the selective service system by force, violence, and otherwise. And I say otherwise, and they said no, by violence. Otherwise meant it was a nonviolent protest. And since we destroyed paper, that which belonged to the government, that made us the people we are. And so Chuck and I still have the great honor of being felons. You know, there's nothing we can do about that. That's part of what we carry with us. So.
Well, I wonder if Chuck could unmute himself, since it's very special to have him here. And he was the one you pushed through into the office first. Maybe Chuck could unmute and describe that day a little bit to us. And what was it like? First of all, were you, as you gathered to do this, were you scared? Were you confident? What were your feelings? Chuck, are you available to unmute and join in this discussion?
I really don't have anything to add. I was in a different city, a different small town than Frank was. I was in Alexandria, Minnesota. And the FBI entered. We didn't know, I had no idea who they were. I was asking, are these vigilantes or something strange like that? And I saw a gun pointed at me. And the words that I heard, although one of my co-defendants said that isn't exactly what he said, was "move and you're dead." My co-defendant, he said, "Don't move or you're dead," which would be more practical. They wouldn't tell you move and you're dead, something that they don't want you to do. But I was part of the draft resistance movement in another aspect of it. I had already refused induction.
Chuck,
unlike
move
Frank,
the camera a little bit so we can see your face, half your face.
I'm sorry.
There, now we can see you. Perfect. Go ahead.
Unlike Frank, I was probably headed for prison already. I was part of the movement that had said, let's fill the jails with middle-class young men, and maybe that will put pressure on the government to end the war. It ended up about 3,250 people did end up going to prison for refusing induction, although many, many more resisted the draft in various ways by not registering, by not telling the Selective Service when they moved to a new address, by turning in their cards and just cutting all contact off with the Selective Service system. So Frank was far more courageous than I was, because I was headed for prison already, but Frank had already completed 2 years of alternative service as a conscientious objector. And even though he had completed that, he decided he needed to do more to help in this war. So my hat's off to Frank. I was headed for prison anyhow. They ended up simply not prosecuting me for refusing induction because they had gotten me on the more serious charge.
Can you take us that day for when they pushed you through the boosted you up and pushed you into the office? Tell us what it was like that day. Were you frightened? Were you feeling emboldened? What was it like to be part of that?
I don't remember what I was feeling. We had already participated in the Beaver 55 raid, where we raided all of the draft boards in St. Paul, Minnesota, Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's Ramsey County of Minnesota, Hennepin County of Minnesota, and the state selective service offices. And we had destroyed all of the 1A files in all of those offices in February of 1970. So I think we were pretty confident. We probably were pretty naive. We never expected to get caught. I don't think my heart was beating any stronger or anything. We expected to get away with it. Yeah, I'm short, as Frank noted, I'm 5'1" now. I was 5'2" at the time. And I had trouble getting up to the roof, to the window ledge to get up to the roof on our draft board. So one of my co-defendants, Bill Tilton, pulled me up to get up to the roof of a garage that we ended up jumping up to the second floor to get into to a window to the women's bathroom in the building that we went into.
People should know that Chuck is a Phi Beta Kappa and one of the smartest people that I've ever met.
Frank hasn't met very many smart people, I can.
Well, I think you're both amazing people. There's a movie called 1971 about this kind of a raid. This was the one on the FBI office that revealed that the FBI was grossly violating the civil liberties of everybody in the country, and that made huge headlines. But I want to go back a little bit to the momentousness of the action that Frank and Chuck and the others took. And that is that because of your raids, as I understand it, you virtually saved almost all the young men in Minnesota from being drafted and sent to the war. Is that correct?
Yeah, Arthur, that's true. But you know what you find out is that they weren't, it's not like the men from Minnesota, so they went down to Iowa and Montana and got more bodies. It's like the system. It's a hydra-headed monster. You can't stop it.
Well, so the system drafted people in other areas, but there in Minnesota, you have so many people. You mentioned the one story of the fellow who was grateful that he has children and grandchildren, and wouldn't have had that if it weren't for you. So in the state of Minnesota, there were millions of young men who have now gotten to carry on their life thanks to the courage of the action that people like you and Chuck took, and being willing to go to prison to stand up for stopping the war machine.
Yeah, but the prison experience is like a whole other story.
Well, tell us about that.
No, it's a whole other conversation. I mean, it's just like, living in prison someone like me had to sort of go there to understand it. And I've been involved in prison work and writing about it ever since. But that's, again, another story. During the time, which a lot of these people have lived through, there are a lot of people who wanted to live in a world without war. I mean, part of what, Arthur, you and Melanie are all about, being a world citizen. It was the first time that people started talking that way. Like, to be a good American, you had to be a good Earth person. That was part of the deal. And this is something that's still up for discussion. And there's a lot of, when, you talk to young people today, like my oldest son is a professor at the University of Hong Kong, School of Law. He's been living in China. He's probably going to marry a Chinese woman. That just didn't, in our day, that China was like really far away. Now we have conversations over the internet and cell phones and all that stuff. So the fact is that it was a really very different time, but the disillusionment with the government, we're facing a lot of that right now. Things go on. This is why things go on with the regular government that, before all the shenanigans that have been going on with Trump's people, there's sort of enough issues still that we haven't faced. And that is we are, I just want everybody to realize that we still are in the first phase of nuclear war. It's been declared. We, as a country, started it by dropping the first atom bomb. Questionable whether we should have dropped the second, but that's a whole other story, and the discussion is always behind all that stuff. But the fact of the matter is that, a lot of people, like on this call, Alice Holstein was in the military, and there are a lot of good people who basically risked their lives. There are a lot of good people who died, trying to defend an America that they thought existed. But part of like what happened by knowing Daniel Ellsberg, who was the highest ranking civilian in the government at the time that he started doing the type of work he did, is that the government was lying. And this was from our generation. It's sort of the worst heritage, but nevertheless, the heritage we give to young people today. Can you trust the government? People go, well, I'm not sure about that, And so my two sons have found a way of avoiding the draft without doing what their old man, who they think is half crazy for all that he did. They were in academia and stuff like that, and they evaded, having to do service. So I just want to also make clear that I think that it's important that we do national service for our country. And this is one of the things I feel badly about, is that this issue sort of glosses over a lot of other issues that are important to look at. And one of the things is we have to build a strong society. I was raised a Roman Catholic, and we were always, this is not a Catholic country. We were sort of other people. And it wasn't until J.F. Kennedy was made president that Catholics sort of became acceptable people. So the thing is that it's the story that I try to tell people is that the one thing I want people to take away from all this is that when you go somebody think something is risky, go do it. My biggest fear was what was going to happen in the future. My story is fine. I've had a rough decade or so after prison, but I went into the corporate world. I've been president of a company. I've done a bunch of different things, new technologies, stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, what I feel good about is that, when I had a chance to act, I did. And Chuck is a great example of a person who's still throughout his whole life has carried the message of peace and good thinking. Chuck is one of the smartest guys you'll ever meet. I just trust him.
Terrific. Well,
I've met a lot of smart people.
Very pleased that he's part of this with us and got to share a little bit about the event. And by the way, if other people have questions or comments, put them in the chat, and we'll turn it over to Melanie soon to have people jump in. But I think it's so crucial. You mentioned Kennedy and whether the government lies. This is the most crucial issue. As President Kennedy put it, every man, woman, and child lives under a nuclear sword of Damocles, hanging by the slenderest of threads, capable of being cut at any moment by accident, by miscalculation or madness. The weapons of war must be abolished before they abolish us. And that's so absolutely true. And not just nuclear war, it's really the whole war system. Nuclear weapons are a key part of that. But the whole war system is totally insane. In no country in the world is killing allowed. And yet outside countries, we're allowed to kill people. You could, inside countries, that's what the world is my country is all about. In our people-powered planet, of course it's illegal to kill people. You can't, all war is legalized criminality that somehow outside of countries we're allowed to do because there's no law. So it's crucial that we the people find a way to free ourselves from this, or we're toast. That's the end of the world through ecocide or nuclear war. So what you're doing is crucial work. And so you're right. Yes, it's risky to go to prison, but how much riskier is it to lose everything, the whole existence of life on Earth, including not just the human species, but others? I see Chuck wants to jump in. Let's go ahead, Chuck.
I just wanted to make one other comment. What we did and what all the draft board raiders, the draft resistors, the tax resistors of that era did was much in the spirit of what Gary Davis did. It was taking direct action. It was moving from petitioning some other entity, whether it be a government, to taking an action that will put into place what you want to, what your vision is for the future yourself. So it was very much in the spirit of what Gary Davis did as a direct action, or a part of the history of direct action movements in the United States.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, you're right. It's one thing to write letters and beg and plead government leaders to change things. But as Bucky Fuller said, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. You've got to create a new model, and you've got to go out and do it yourselves. And what Frank did was actually to free the young men of Minnesota from getting drafted to have to go kill people in this awful war. And the fact that you sent these blank cards to Canada and gave them ways to issue to get people back with official 4F statuses, that is brilliant. And so I think it's really pretty impressive, the work you've pulled off. And there are so many unsung heroes. Now, of course, Daniel Ellsberg is much better known, but I highly recommend a movie by our friend Judith Ehrlich called The Most Dangerous Man in America. Now, why is Dan Ellsberg the most dangerous man in America? I think that's what Kissinger called him, because he was revealing the truth. And revealing the truth is dangerous. Oh my God! If you're trying to keep the empire in running, you don't want people going around revealing the truth. So Daniel Ellsberg, of course, has been a big hero to many because he did have the willingness to put his life on the line and to reveal the truth of these papers. And then look at all the newspapers. It's you've seen the movies about Watergate and so on, but the fact that that it was a very daring thing. The Washington Post and these other papers, they were being threatened by the government. You know, we'll shut you down. We'll charge you with espionage. But they decided that the press together, they sort of, you know, the Washington Post released a section, and then the Philadelphia Inquirer, and then the Denver, whatever, and different newspapers all over released parts of these Pentagon Papers. And these journalists had courage in those days to stand out and to release these things. And it became so big that the government couldn't possibly prosecute all the newspapers in the country for revealing these Pentagon Papers, which, you know, what national secret was it? The secret was that the government's lying to you folks, and they're lying to you about the most crucial thing, which is the very survival of life on Earth. Well, let's see who else has a comment or questions. Can I throw it over to you, Melanie, to take over? All right, Melanie's going to go ahead, and she's watching the chat, and she's watching your questions. She's going to take over at this point. Our amazing producer, Melanie Bennett.
Thank you, Arthur. Wow, very nice intro. Good, Frank. I just want to say to you really quick, what you are an inspiration. You are an inspiration to people who maybe are afraid to take action, not sure, but you come, like you said, you come into a desperation mode where you have to do something. And I hope there are times when people will just be brave. There are things that need to be done to move the needle, to stop war, stop the nuclear disaster that we're looking at, and we need to step up. I mean, it's just something you have to do sometimes. You have to blow the whistle. You have to say these are lies. You just have to step up. So I just want to say thank you for your inspiration to all of us to be the better person and to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror. That was a key statement. It's not what other people think of you. It's how you view yourself, and do you feel good about yourself? And
absolutely.
Yeah, we want this world to continue. We want things to, it's such a beautiful place. Why do we have to destroy it? It doesn't make sense. And there are only a few people wanting to do that, and the majority of the people don't want that to happen. So there's no reason why we can't stop that minority from destroying the planet. So thank you, Frank. I'm wondering, I didn't get an okay, but I wondered if Alice, did you want to jump in and just give a little bit of your take on all this?
What I'm interested in other words, Frank, I'm asking you to be revealing is, how did you call upon whatever you called upon to survive prison?
Well, when I went to prison, I had lost both my country, in the sense I was considered the worst of the worst. And like I told you recently, 10 days after my sentence, the Archbishop came out and for all practical purposes kicked me out of the Catholic Church. So I was lost. I mean, I'll be very honest. I mean, I'm a big guy, and people say, you're pulling hard time. And it was true. So when we got out of prison, it was just as much a surprise as what had happened back then in 1971 and 72 and 73. Things happened outside that, again, changed the scenario. Instead of spending 5 years, I spent 14 months. Terrible months. Chuck was in there longer. They went in like 6 months earlier. The story is real much more complicated, very human. What brought me back is this vision of what I call the Earth folk, and I have the website www.earthfolk.net, which talks about the Earth folk, not Earth people, earthfolk.net. And was sort of the realization that one of the things that the Vietnam War brought to me, and you know that world a lot better than I do, Alice, was the fact is that the world is one. You know, part of the deal is that if you took off from, you know, where I live right now, well, I'm visiting my sister in Atlanta, but living in San Diego, and we flew around the world, we'd come back to San Diego. I mean, it's round, and all the people on it are our brothers and sisters. And so this was a period of time when the last thing to do was to look at, and so, okay, so I'm in prison with people who I have no romantic ideas about. I mean, there were guys there who would kill me for, you know, a hot sandwich, you know, I mean, and I worked a lot with convicts going up, non-political people going up in front of the draft board and help them understand how they should talk to the draft board, help them write a statement type of stuff. But nevertheless, it was a terrible thing. I mean, and we need to help people get better. So it's not like you're going to do away with prisons or you're going to do away with the military. You know this about the military. A lot of good people there who want to do good and want to create the world and are leading thinkers for us about what we should do. But at the same time, we don't have any romantic ideas that people are going to like flip overnight. I feel that we have to go forward ourselves in the world that we're in and create a new world, which I call the world of the earth folk, you know, where people really value being part of the earth and living a good life. I could go on, as you can tell.
Well, now, Frank, that actually we have Sharon was kind of wants you to elaborate. Sharon wants you to elaborate on just what you said going forward. What is it, the change that we people need to make?
I think, you know, I was on another call with the whole group of different men yesterday, and people are really like depressed with what's going on over in the Ukraine, of course, which I think we all are. But we're depressed for different reasons. Part of it is the sort of failure again. I mean, Putin's obviously a guy who thinks that the world is, you know, divided up into Russia, like Russia exists independent of Uruguay or any other country. I mean, you know, what we've learned since the 60s basically is that we are the world. What's that song? We are the world. You know, I mean, it's true. We are one. God damn it. You know, why don't our leaders get their heads together and understand that they should get together and start acting that way and do things. So the one thing that makes us realize all of this are these stupid pandemics. I mean, I don't know about you folks, but like I said, I'm 77 years old. I had 4 shots. I have no idea whether they're even telling us the truth about this, but nevertheless, the fact is that, you know, people are dying and things are happening, and it's a world issue. You can't just say, well, we're going to take care of America and make ourselves medically safe. It's not going to work that way. The virus goes around the world. Well, so many other issues, we have to look at them that way, you know. You know, my friend Alice here, she writes about mental illness and the stigma and what needs to be done for understanding people with mental illness as what she calls a spiritual pathway. Very unique material. You should all write down her name and look up her website. I mean, it's really life-changing because it goes the same way. You know, in the Vietnam War, we called people gooks. Other human beings, we call them gooks. Well, you know, I mean, I've been on the other side of that. I'm a number, 8867147. So, you know, I mean, I was treated like I was a gook.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the whole part of the recipe to make people kill each other is to degrade them. They're not human. They're different. You know, and that allows
we even make a big thing about people being French. My first brother-in-law was Italian. I grew up in a town in Bayonne, New Jersey, which is in northern New Jersey, where we had an Irish Catholic church, an Italian church, and a Polish church. So Frank Sophia, when he was dating my older sister, Martha, they've been married now 50 some odd years. In order to break through that, he would go to mass where my father went to mass. So my father would see him. But you know, the idea of marrying a Sophia was like, it's kind of silly today, right?
Yeah, we need to, like you said, remember, we're one humanity. That's why it's so important everybody reach in their mind to really assimilate the idea, I'm a world citizen. I'm part of this whole group, this group of humanity. Now, before we go, we have a couple more questions. I wanted to go to Andrew. Andrew, go right ahead with your question or comment.
Hello, Frank. You sort of touched on this possibly. The attitude of other prisoners to conscientious objectors and whether you think that was different in those days to what it would be now?
the very first guys who went into prison for the war were like, just a couple guys who were in a prison. That was it. When by the time I got there, being a CO, which nobody knew what that meant anymore, conscience subjective, they just called the COs, was accepted. So if you weren't part of a group, you opened yourself up to like being attacked physically or sexually. So when I got there, again, I wouldn't explain everything. They put me in solitary confinement. But when they let me out, one of my guys came, Brad Beneke, to pick me up. And part of the deal is he said, he's one of us. And you needed that type of identity, in order not to be beat up or molested or whatever type of stuff. So that's part of what, what goes on in prison. But at night, when the lights went out, you would hear people having sex. So you'd ask a guy, are you gay? He would say, no. Well, why are you having sex for? Well, I'm doing 5 years and, what else am I going to do? That people have no alternatives. The world they're going to go out, and for some of them is worse than the world inside. At least inside, they sort of know what's going to happen during the day, and they get 3 square meals and stuff like that.
We're going to go to Joseph. Joseph, go right ahead.
Well, you've mentioned Catholicism a lot, and well, I was raised Catholic, and I used to hang out at the Catholic Worker at their Friday night meetings, and it had a tremendous influence on me. And my question was, what did the Archbishop say? Why did he excommunicate you? And what was his reasoning? Because if you do Catholicism right, it's kind of radical socialism. And it calls for world citizen. No, if you do it right, and it calls for world citizenship. I peruse libraries occasionally on world citizenship, and apart from Gary's works, there were a lot of popes that constantly spoke about the need for world citizenship and world government. So what did the bishop, what was his reasoning? I don't quite get it.
No, he never called me in to sort of explain that to me. It was sort of a letter that was a mandate. Sort of like, you've been judged by the civil authorities, to be a convict. And so he was saying to all his pastors that he was shocked that they allowed me to preach. So that was about it, even though I had a master's degree in theology at the time. So he didn't say, come and talk to me or, come visit or whatever. It was like, from a distance. So, I had just stood up in court and been told that you're the worst of human beings and you got to do 5 years in prison. And my mother is in, hearing has said, well, one of her children, my son's going to prison for 5 years. And so the paper, some articles in the paper talked about us in a positive way. Some of them talked about us in a negative way. And his was just sort of a negative, like, you messed up, kid, you're out.
Wow. Oh my God.
So I was too depressed by the whole thing. It's like nothing I was doing was having any effect. I mean, we're 50 years plus, away from that time, and I can see some positive impact. But the fact of the matter is, you people are all struggling today with still trying to create the world where, again, like with Arthur and Melanie keep saying, the world is one place. It's like, how stupid can you be? You get in an airplane and you fly around, you end up back where you started from. We all understand. People should, they should get it.
Yes, we want people to get it. And that's why we want to get this film out. But my goodness, Frank, no, you made a huge difference. And you're making a huge difference right now by inspiring us. So thank you. Now, we only have a few minutes, so I'm going to go back to Arthur. Arthur, take it away.
Well, before I do, I think we can run a little over. I see there's a very interesting question or comment by Marie.
Is that okay, Frank?
I don't mind going over if you're okay with it, Frank.
Frank said he's okay. All right. So then, so Marie, she never heard of Gary Davis or the World Citizen Movement until a couple of weeks ago. However, since junior high, if not sooner, I've never felt or been patriotic to any country. I would tell people I'm a patriot of the whole world and that every person everywhere is my brother or sister. That's how I still think and feel. I'm 66 now. My adult son is a physicist and an atheist. When applying for jobs, he invariably told the interviews that he could not work on any weapon. My icon for my picture is a drawing from my then almost 7-year-old granddaughter. That is the world I want for her. I will save more for another time. Love you all. Thank you to all of you. So there you are. Thank you, Marie. It was so great to have you here. And Yes, so back to you, Arthur now. Back to you.
Okay,
Arthur.
sure. And what a beautiful comment to close on. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We do want to suggest several resources to have you continue. One is, of course, to go, I'm sure all of you have seen the movie, but if you haven't, go to theworldismycountry.com and just click on how to watch the movie. And then also, if you go to The World Is My Country /WeGov, WEGOV, you'll see a little talk I gave where I described how we can actually create a people-powered planet, how we can not sit around waiting for government leaders to solve the problem, but where we can directly go into helping to enforce, for instance, the nuclear treaty, which it has had enough ratifications that it is now officially international law. Go to theworldismycountry.com and click on the People Powered Planet podcast and sign up for our club. If you can, be a member by you get the first 2 months free, and then you can give us a little monthly support each month to keep going if you'd like. If not, you can sign up just free there, just to join us for the fun and good feeling of it. But we'd love to have you be one of our members. Joe is saying something there. Let Joe.
Yeah, I would just love to again thank you, Arthur and Melanie, for bringing Frank to my attention. Wow, I knew nothing about your story. That's incredible. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That is just amazing. And and again, always to Melanie and Arthur for bringing Gary Davis to so many people's attention that I'm sure many people who've been in the peace movement forever, like I have, did not know about Gary Davis until you all did what you did. So, I just feel grateful for you all every day. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. We love you. And we love all of you.
I'd like to make one final comment. We are not alone. I mean, I think sometimes, you go home after a protest or whatever, and you just think, I'm going to die someday. I'm getting old. Look at this white hair. We're not alone. And there are young people stepping up. You meet them every place, all types of different organizations. And it's because there's no central office of like resistance to whatever. I mean, except you get groups like, The World Is My Country and stuff like that. People Powered Planet. You're all doing it. So the thing that I find out, trust me, seeing all of you here, it just means so much to me because, there was so many times that I was just like alone and I had to go look at Chuck Turchick to sort of feel that there was somebody, besides me in the world who was as crazy. But you're all wonderful, crazy people. You believe in peace. I think that's wonderful.
Wonderful, crazy people. And that's what, Gary Davis, he had the nerve to be crazy, and ain't it great to be willing to step out of the norm and be crazy enough to say, hey, humanity should live and we should survive on this planet. And so let's do it, folks. Let's do it and let's keep having fun doing it. Okay, is Charlotte trying to jump in with a comment?
Yeah, Frank, I just want to commend you because essentially what you did was you saved thousands of people to not have to go and kill thousands of people in Vietnam. So I think that's wonderful. Yes. And you said something about building for our nation. And what always upset me when I started working at CDI with Arthur, Center for Defense Information, is that there were always the big commercials to join the Army, the Navy, what have you, but very little about join the Peace Corps. Good to rejoin you, Arthur.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for joining us. Charlotte was a part of, we were working at the Center for Defense Information in Washington, where we made the film War Without Winners with Paul Newman.
Yeah.
But we were working with admirals and generals who were speaking out for peace, people who were had been in the heart of the military. Admiral LaRocque had been a key player in Pearl Harbor and so on. And yet these people, he said, there's no way I can be true to my oath to protect and defend the country by nuclear war, because there's no country. I've destroyed the country if I do that. The only way to do it, he said, is to avert a nuclear war. So yes, do also go to warwithoutwinners.com, and you can see a movie that we made there that Charlotte was part of doing, and that is very relevant to the world today as we're still inching toward perilously close to nuclear war. And we, the people, are the power force that's going to help us step back and save this world. Thank you for joining us in another episode of the People Powered Planet Podcast.
World citizen, lift up your voices. Oh, you know we got something to say. All we need is the same directions, heading in one way.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video.